Hello once again, and welcome back to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name's Brian Vitale, and I have most of the usual crew here today. Adam can't make it, but everyone else is here. Let's go through them. We have Josh Torres.
Hi.
We have James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And we have finally located Mr. George Foster.
Hello.
Welcome back, George.
Glad to be here.
How has your time been with a certain prediction that we made since the last time?
I can't even begin to describe how amazing he is.
Well, we will go into your magical experience playing as Sora in Smash Bros. Ultimate in a bit, but I am still a bit just pleased that we
me too.
I always believed that George was like, no, he was like a doomsayer for his favorite character. I'm like, George, it could have happened. And he was like, no.
I still don't believe it. He's my icon. He is. I play as him literally any time. I'm literally only ever thinking about Sora and Smash at the moment, and I still don't believe it's real. So I'm right there still.
So looking at the outline of our discussion today, it seems like the theme here is going to be, I hope you're looking forward to next year, because we've talked about on the last few podcasts on how every single year, and this year included, that the Q1 of the upcoming release schedule always ends up looking like incredibly packed. And I kind of always waved it away and just say it happens every year, but I guess it's maybe even worse this year due to what has transpired over 2020 and 2021, because we've got delays, we've got some new announcements, we've got some next gen stuff that are all landing in the February 2022 window, and we will go through those. We do have a few games that are coming out up in the next week that we have kind of been waiting for, including Super Robot Wars, which we've talked about a bunch of times. We've got the Undernauts and Yomi game, or whatever it's called now. It has the two different names in Japanese and English. We've got a couple other games that are releasing in late October. We've got obviously the big hitters coming up after that, like Shin Megami Tensei. So that will be the kind of the theme for the evening, or whatever time it is we're recording this or you're listening to this. Before we go into that, though, we're going to talk about games we've been playing. And finally, for the first time in 3 months, I am able to contribute to this conversation, because
the journey is over.
Yes, I have finally finished Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Yeah, a video game. So yes. So in early September, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous released. Now, this is a game that is an RPG through and through, for sure. But it's kind of the sort of RPG that our site doesn't focus on pretty often. We've got a few people that play these sorts of games, but it's never really been the centerpiece of our coverage. But I really enjoyed Kingmaker, Pathfinder Kingmaker, which released a few years ago. And this was the pretty quick follow-up, because a lot of the other studios that had released games like Divinity Original Sin 2 and Deadfire back in the late 2010s, they're not making, I guess Baldur's Gate 3 is still in development, but Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous had released, and it took, first of all, it's a massive, massive game. It took me 112 hours to beat, which is unheard of for RPGs. A lot of the Kiseki games at least recently, end up running up there as well. But in terms of my life, having to get moved into a new house, having to put the game down, it had a lot of bugs. I had to wait for some patches.
We're only getting older, and the less free time we have, the older we get until we retire. Then we'll have free time again.
Oh yeah, when this is still.
So before you go into it, Brian, I have two comments. One, oh my god, a game can be that long. I hate it. I hate it so very much. And two, pretend I'm an idiot. What is Pathfinder?
Okay,
give me
first of all, I am not an expert, but I've played the two video games. That is my level of expertise. I've played Kingmaker.
2 video games.
Well, I've played Kingmaker through twice, and then I've played, obviously, Wrath of the Righteous through once. So Pathfinder is a pen and paper tabletop game that is splintered off of, I believe, Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. So roughly 15 years ago or so. And so it has the very same feeling as Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, things like that. And Owlcat is a Russian studio. This is the only 2 games that they've developed, as far as I know, is Kingmaker in 2018 and Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous now, where this is basically adapting the pen and paper game for a video game, format. And sometimes when you do that, you do have to like shift some rules. Things that make sense in pen and paper don't make sense in a video game, things like that. And certain people feel very strongly about like how faithful it is or how much liberty they take. And I can't really speak to the pen and paper game, so I don't really know. But it does, if you've played Baldur's Gate, if you've played Pillars of Eternity, or if you've played any of those like other homages.
Are we talking real time with pause or actual turn based?
A real time with pause. Well,
okay.
That's actually a component of this game. So first of all, let me just go through like the general premise. So the general premise is that a mysterious otherworldly rift is basically centered on one of the continents of the planet of Galarian. I forget what the continent's name is. This rift is called the World Wound. It is basically a place where the demon world of the Abyss and the human world intersect. So it allows people to move freely. Well, maybe not freely, but it gives an avenue for people to move from one to the other. Then in the history of this world, there have been several crusades, obviously borrowing from the idea of real life crusades, where crusaders will then embark on quests and journeys to try to push back the demon horde and close the rift. But none of them have succeeded. And this is basically the timeline of this game is the final crusade that finally does close the rift, and you end up playing as the commander of the 5th crusade. That's your player character. So it is a real time with pause Baldur's Gate RPG where you choose like a set of 6 party members, and they have like a ton of classes. Your typical like paladin or ranger, but then also like a bunch of Pathfinder specific ones like Blood Rager and Cavalier or whatever.
It's a lot. It's like 25. It's like 25 classes, right?
Yeah, it's so when I opened this game up and I got to the character's creation, which is the first thing you do in any of these games, I had played Kingmaker twice. So, and other people who had played maybe the tabletop game might not have like a sense of information overload, but I sure did, because it's like, do I want to play a caster? Do I want to play a fighter? But like, even if you like narrow it down that much, you end up having like, all right, so you want to play a caster? You still have 18 options to choose from or whatever. Or you want to wield a greatsword? You still have at least 7 options to choose from. And then if you're really into like min-maxing or making like a super efficient build, you have to start thinking about like, you can multi-class in like crazy ways. And I've seen some builds where it's like, you should take 1 level of Ranger and then 2 levels of Paladin and then 3 levels of Hell Knight and then go into prestige classes. And I'm just like, I'm going to just pick one and stick with it. I ended up picking Cavalier, and Cavalier is kind of like a melee fighting class that is more focused on supporting the party. They share combat feats and stances and things like that. So they do melee damage, but they're more about like anchoring the team rather than just DPS or damage per round, I guess. Now, I've always preferred these games with real time with pause. To me, it allows you to have kind of heuristics for, I know how to buff my party. I know where to position my characters. I don't need to micromanage every single thing. Like, for instance, in Kingmaker and in Wrath of the Righteous, some of the easiest classes that I've found to build are any archers, so rangers or bow-using monks or anything that uses a longbow, really, because there are so many ways to like augment how much damage you do and your chance to hit. So I would always have like 2 NPCs just standing in the back of the group, just completely like nailing and murdering down all the weak enemy mobs, where Wrath of the Righteous does have a turn-based mode. It's actually built off of a Kingmaker mod that they've sort of like blessed and kind of canonized, like made semi-official. And I love turn-based games. Like Fire Emblem, the Final Fantasy Tactics games. I even kind of like when games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's not a turn-based game, but you can sort of see how they use that same sort of inspiration to design how their combat flows. So on paper, this ended up sounding like, oh, it has a turn-based toggle that I can select at any point. You can shift into it or shift out of it. But what happens is that the game is so clearly designed for a real time, where if you do any combat encounter in turn-based, it ends up feeling like 8 times as slow as it should have. Where if you run into a room and there's like 6 little demons and 2 mini bosses in the back, if you're playing real time with pause, you just kind of like position your characters in a semi-careful manner, get your tank out in front, get your damage dealers in back, and the fight is probably over in like maybe 45 seconds, and maybe you'll fail, maybe you die, and then you just kind of like reload and shift your approach or whatever. But if you're in turn-based mode, it ends up taking literally like 15 minutes to go, okay, I should be careful how I use literally. It ends up taking significantly longer to do the same stuff. And I told you, this game already took me over 100 hours. I am scared to know what someone's playtime would be if they were diligent enough or like determined enough to play through the whole thing in turn-based, because I could easily see that being like 250, 300 hours, because the game, I just feel like wasn't designed for it. Maybe
Okay, so I have a question. So, this game is already really long as it is, but if a new person wants to get into it, and like because they're a bit itchy for that, do they have to play the previous Pathfinder first?
No, it's
Okay.
they take place around the same time, and there are a few characters that sort of cross over, but it's in a different part of the world. It doesn't really tie into it. Like the crossovers that there are is more like, gee whiz, you remember this guy, right? Or they'll have like a line where they reference the events of the previous game, but the story is completely divorced. And one thing that Kingmaker sort of did is that it had, and I've been drafting my review for this game, and it'll probably go up at some point next week. And despite these two games not really being sequels to each other, they're more just like two games that take place in the same universe. It's really hard to talk about one without comparing it to the other, because Kingmaker was designed, the part of its name, Kingmaker, is that not only is it a classic CRPG styled game, but it also has like secondary gameplay mechanics where you are building a fledgling kingdom in a foreign land, where you have to manage like resources and economy and your military, and you have to make decisions about like what your new kingdom's going to focus on. And there's like this world map, and you start creating little outposts and forts. So it's like a game within a game sort of thing. And
like 4X elements in it almost.
Yeah. And my impression when I played that game, it's like, this is fine, but I just don't feel like it adds anything. I kind of wish I could just like pull that out of there and just leave the RPG remaining, because a lot of the other stuff just felt like it didn't really elevate the rest of the game. It just felt unneeded, unnecessary. And then
sort of like that game that we talked about a couple of weeks ago that our theme music comes from, right?
Terranigma? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Yes.
Reminds me of when George was last.
I'm just proud I remembered that. I'm just proud that I remembered like anything like that. Carry on.
You could remember the name, but you're like, yeah, it's like that.
But so in Wrath of the Righteous, I can't speak for everyone, and painting everyone with a single brush is improper, but it just seems like the general consensus was that no one really took to the Kingmaker sort of management stuff that well. Like at best you were fine with it, at worst you thought it was really a distraction, and you just kind of like set it to super easy mode and automate it. And by the way, I should mention that maybe turn-based mode would be better if you like deliberately turn the difficulty down so there was fewer enemies, but I didn't. I just set it to real time and didn't look back. But then for Wrath of the Righteous, even though it's got a different premise. It's got the premise about leading these crusades, so there is no kingdom management to deal with, right? Well, they still sort of like brought those elements over, and they just kind of tweaked how they're implemented. So now instead of managing kingdoms, you manage crusader armies. So you have your normal party where you have very classic WRPG where there's like 12 or so. It depends on your alignment and your choices in the game, how many you get. You get 12 or so companions. Certain ones have different dispositions. They all have their own story. But then also you can toggle over into your generic army management, where you lead like soldiers and archers and cavaliers across the world map, and they run into demon armies. And then it has this whole other gameplay mode where if you lead your army up against a demon fort, you end up having to like have a overhead grid-based, turn-based in this specific context, battle where you have to lead your crusade armies, not your party, just your generic armies against generic enemy demon mooks or whatever. And I've heard it compared to Heroes of Might and Magic, which is a series I've never played, but I started looking at some gameplay footage as I was like writing the review, and it's basically the same thing. So if you've played Heroes of Might and Magic, overhead, grid view, turn-based sort of, you have a commander on your side and the enemy might have a general on their side, and it's a game within a game again. They've just kind of shifted how it's implemented. But
how customizable can you like affect the outcomes of these? Like, are you actually have like a lot of minutia with customizing like your crusade armies and whatnot to affect the outcome, or is it kind of like it's
you
own thing that
do.
you-
Well, I feel like it's kind of the intent was that you would have a lot of say into how your eventual like composition of your armies turned out, because you start out with like some very basic units, but then as you support other factions, like early in the game, you get a character who is a class called a Hell Knight on your team. And then if you help them out, you can end up getting Hell Knights, generic ones, to recruit for your Crusader armies, and they're pretty good. They're pretty good units. And then eventually you end up. I haven't even talked about the Mythic Path system yet, but eventually you'll like very generically you'll choose kind of like a deity or sort of like magical inclination that your character has. And that might affect whether you can get like dragons on your team or nymphs or elves or demons on your own side. So the intent was to sort of see, like, based on the role that you end up making your character make, you would have that sort of be reflected in your armies. But here, I'll give you one really short anecdote. Late in the game, I don't know if this was like a rare quest or something I just lucked into, but I ended up being able to get silver dragons on my team. And I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, I get silver dragons in my
awesome.
crusade army. But I learned that they were so weak that
What?
just my regular like archers that you get like for free every 7 in-game days or whatever would overpower basically anything. So like early on, I had this strat where basically my general would effectively have like a stun shout where he would stun all the enemies, and then I would just have archers like pick everyone off. Like by hour number 10, that was my strategy was, and by hour number 100, that's what my strategy was. So long story short, it started out as like a curiosity, like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep an open mind. This different format of game is, I'll try it. I'll try to at least give it a fair shake. But then eventually I was like, oh God, like I'm in a new chapter and now there's more demons to take care of at the map. I have to go back to fucking crusade mode. So I ended up not really feeling very strongly about it at all. And it ended up becoming a chore really, really fast.
Okay.
And so I ended up basically arriving at the same place that Kingmaker did, where I'm just like, I will talk about the rest of the RPG because as a like the normal quote unquote part of the game is actually really good, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of these sorts of games. Chances are, if you are, you've already been playing this. But
I used to play a lot like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale type of CRPGs, but I just this one just like
they're a commitment.
The massive amount of time is like I want to get to this, and now that my PC is like really good, like it's something that's on my radar now that like I can actually run it fairly well if I were to get into it. Like the more I hear about this game, the more I'm like very interested. It's just like I need to find the block of time to do it.
It's just basically I feel that both Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous took like this kitchen sink approach where they're like, let's have army management, let's have like world map, like where you build up forts and use resources to create buildings, and then let's I just kind of feel like less would be more. Like if you just pulled that out of the game and didn't change anything else, I feel like I would almost rate the game higher, just because it's like less distractions. Like just because it reminds me of a stupid ProZD skit where it's like games that think more mechanics equals more fun or whatever. And I'm like, this is like the poster boy for like, no, stop, please, just you find an editor. And maybe there's someone out there that really, really enjoyed that part of the game, and more power to you. But I just felt like I would look at the Crusade stuff as being like, let me get through this so I can get back to the part of the game I actually want to play.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird, like, I wonder how many hours do you think it would cut if they just didn't do that Crusade micromanagement part of the game, or management part of the game rather.
Probably the game would still be long, but probably like a fourth of the playtime.
That seems more like, at least digestible.
Yeah.
Because now just like the whole 25% of the game is like something that you didn't really engage with like after all was said and done.
I remember so this game is divided into 5 acts, and when I got to the 5th act, and there was like 20 little demon army. So when you're on the world map, your army is like represented by like almost like game pieces, like a board game, and so are little demon armies. It's a nice aesthetic. I kind of like that's how they decided to represent it. But there's like 20 little demon dudes like just sitting. Oh god damn! I gotta like clear all these out before I can get back to the game.
Is there a penalty to like just not engaging with that mode?
Well, the thing is that you do need to engage in that mode a bit, because there would be like demon forts that will prevent your actual party from getting to certain areas on the map. So if you want to do all the questing or whatever, you have to clear them out. Though there's probably areas where I could have not done as much as I did, where like I cleared out every demon on the map, or maybe I didn't have to. But you do have to. You can't just ignore it fully. And the thing is that there is a way to sort of automate it, where you'll just run your unit into another enemy unit in battle, and it will just automatically determine the outcome.
Oh, it's like an auto resolve, like in a Total War game.
Yeah, but what happens is that whenever I tried that, like I would do an auto outcome and it'd be like, you win, but you lost half your units. I'm like, and then I'm just like, all right, let me just do it myself and use my shitty archer stun strategy and clear the battle, losing none of my units. So like even the auto resolve didn't gain me anything. All right, I want to talk about the real game now. So
the
real game, the actual good game. So this game is very long, as I said, but it does have Kingmaker, again, it's kind of inevitable they have to compare these, or maybe that's just the best way I can put it into context. Kingmaker had a series of, I believe, 7 acts, where each of the acts, at least in the first part of the game, was kind of like a separate chapter. It took place in the same setting, involving the same characters, but the focus would clearly shift. Like early on, one of the earliest acts in Kingmaker is basically your kingdom is besieged by a threat of trolls. And then later it's undead. And then eventually barbarians move into the region and you have to deal with them. And then the game eventually sort of ties it together at the end. It ends up kind of coalescing, it ends up feeling disparate to begin with, but then coming together by the finale. Wrath of the Righteous is a little bit more contiguous, where it feels more standard, where all the chapters flow into each other in a more like linear fashion. So it's a little bit more, I think I like that approach a bit better. But it does still, like each act is like 15 or 20 hours, depending on how slow you are and how thorough you are. And the game has this habit of really changing what the game's fundamental like framework is for each act. In Act 1, you are in the city of Canabras, where basically it's a fort city that's besieged by demons, and the whole play style of the act is you just going through the city to retake the market square and the city hall, and dealing and finding that's where you meet all your companions, because it's, well, not all of them, but most of them, because it's early in the game and things like that, and you're sort of just acclimating to the setting. Then in Act 2, remember, this is like 15 hours, at least 10 hours into the game at this point, you're finally introduced to the world map and the Crusade battles. So like the way that it doles out gameplay stuff is at a very slow pace. And then in Act 2, and I'll speak more generically the further I get for anyone who's concerned about spoilers, if you are. In Act 2, it ends up being like, here's the world map. Your destination is to go here and complete the objective here across the map. And of course, on the way, you can get sidetracked and do side quests and things like that. Then in Act 3, it finally introduces your Crusade management mode, where you end up having like a council of like a military advisors, and it adds even more gameplay elements. And that's when you can start building forts. And remember, this is like 35 hours into the game. So the game is still like teaching you stuff many hours into the game. And then here's my favorite part. In Act 4, it drops all of it. It ends up basically saying, you don't need to worry about any of this stuff for this part of the game. And I'm just like, why? Okay, it's interesting. It's enough to kind of keep it fresh, but it's just the pacing is just different from other games that I've played. Where I'm thinking like of something like Fire Emblem, where you get the monastery early and it just carries throughout the whole game. Where imagine if like that game, I don't know why I'm using that as my comparison, had like a series of chapters, like 10 in a row, where you had no monastery to deal with. Like it just changes how the entire game felt for like a good chunk of the game. And then by the game's final act, it throws you back on the world map and says, no, never mind, you have to deal with this crusade crap again. And I'm like, God damn it. So
It keeps you on your toes.
but yeah, it very deliberately like changes the framework of what you're responsible for, what you have to take care of at a very slow pace, because remember, each act is at least 10 hours if you're fast. I will give it one piece of credit that I thought was actually kind of inspiring. So I know I'm just numbering off a bunch of acts here, but once you're introduced to the crusade management, you end up building up your armies, blah 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 blah, all the stuff I said before, and then you go into the part of the game where you don't have access to them, like you don't have to worry about them. The story reason for that is because you go into the abyss, which makes sense. Like if the premise of the game is to close this world wound, that this planar rift to the abyss, you end up going to there. Then when you return to the world, basically it says like all the stuff that you did previously is no longer valid. We've taken it away from you. And it's like, it's legitimately frustrating. It's like, but I built up all my armies. I was at a good spot and you took that away. But I actually kind of thought that was a really smart implementation of having the gameplay and the story really tethered together, where it's like, we are selling you the idea that this crusade is draining, that like your armies are losing, that you have to turn this around because we've returned you to the world map and now things have gone to shit. And I actually kind of thought that was really like, this is frustrating, but I'm actually okay with it because it kind of inspires the story and it makes sense.
Like NIS.
Yeah, that's a kind of a good example where it's using the framework of this is a video game to sell like the idea that time has passed and things have gone to shit, rather than just saying like, oh, you're back at the world map, all the armies that you made, a year in game ago are still fine, and we don't want to inconvenience the player, so we'll just give you all the stuff back. So I actually thought that was really kind of inspired. The story itself, basically, I do think that the length of the game is kind of to its benefit, because there's like 12 different companions. They each have like 4 or 5 different quests that kind of unveils their individual storylines, and it gives each one kind of like enough room to breathe, to not feel like you're rapid firing through like someone's like personal dilemma and you're just kind of like knocking them off a chessboard, where you'll go into one part of the game and one character will end up being a focus point, and you'll have 2 or 3 quests with them, and another character will kind of sit on the sidelines. Then you go back to another part of the game and the other character will kind of mesh into the narrative in a more natural way. And I just feel like if the game was half as long, yes, it would be half as long, which some people might think is a benefit all of itself. But then I just feel like they couldn't have done the diligence that they did to make sure that these characters feel like characters, that you actually kind of have time to digest what their motivations are, why they're with you in your crusade. And the sheer number of characters does kind of help. I'll put it this way. There was a point in the game where I had to fight one of the party members I had, that a fighter character that ended up quite using a lot, but had to end up like killing them because they disagreed with my choices. And I immediately went to like the wikis or whatever to figure out like, what do I say so I don't have to like fight them because I want to keep them. But basically, it was too late. Like I did not make the right decisions to keep them on my side, because the characters have different dispositions and different like motivations, and you won't always be able to please or save everyone. And I'm sure
Is it all always human party members, or it's like different races?
No, but it's all over the place. And
Okay.
I actually kind of think that some of the races in Pathfinder, and I don't know how much of this is lifted from D&D, actually are really kind of interesting. Like for instance, one of my favorites is gnomes. So gnomes have a different interpretation depending on what fantasy world you're looking at. In this world, they come from another dimension's not the right word, but they come from like another plane of existence. Like they're not natives to this planet. And because of that, there's like a magical energy that sort of rejects them, that they refer to as the bleaching. So gnomes have kind of they don't know how long they have to live. They usually live pretty long, but at some point their skin starts wrinkling, their hair goes white, and they just kind of like age and die really quickly. What that ends up doing is that most of the gnomes that you meet are like really ambitious and really determined because they don't know how long they have to live. And it's kind of just like, and it's an interesting like magical aspect that's kind of how the framework of their race is designed. And you have a gnome in your party who basically has actually the Hell Knight that I mentioned earlier. His name is Regal. He's one of your party members. Is a gnome who has started to show signs of bleaching, and you kind of wonder like, how long does he have to live? How much does this bother him? And he has kind of a different interpretation of his own mortality compared to a gnome that was in the previous game who just kind of identified it differently. So that's just like one example. One of the best characters of this game is actually a demon in her own right. Her name is Arushale. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She is basically a demon who ended up killing a priestess. I believe I have this right. I hope Pathfinder wiki experts don't poke at this too much. But she ended up killing. She's a succubus, and she ended up tricking, manipulating, and then killing a priestess of Desna, which is one of the the pantheon of gods in this world. But eventually, like, she ended up wanting to become devout to this goddess herself, and basically overcome her own demonic nature. So basically, she's a demon that wants to be good, to put it plainly. And no one trusts her. Everyone thinks that she's a succubus. Everything she's saying is just to manipulate you. So do you trust her, or do you don't? And then there's this one point in the game where she ends up saying, I need a favor. I need you to come here and do this with me to help take care of an issue of her quest. It's like her second or third to last quest line. And then you go there and realize that she lied to you. She still needed your help. She wasn't interested in attacking you or killing you, but she manipulated you anyway because it's in her nature. And it was sort of stuff like that where she was like, I'm a demon. I'm a demon commander. This is all I know. Like manipulations, lies, subterfuge. I'm good at that. Asking for a favor, I've never come to understand that sort of thing. So I really do think that the characters in this game, and they were great in the last game too. It's the length of the runtime of this game allows those sorts of revelations, those sorts of story unfolding to feel really natural and not like it's too brisk, not like it's too superficial and surface level. This game in general really enjoys, if you enjoy reading, you will enjoy this game, because there are so many times where a block of text will appear at the bottom, and the game has a decent amount of voice acting where it will a character will say a certain line that might be like just a single sentence, but then it gives a ton of context about, obviously this is an isometric game, so like the animations are very limited. I still think it's a gorgeous game, actually. I think it has a really nice art style, but you kind of have to glean and play with your mind's eye what the framework and the staging of the scene that's going on. And that's what the text allows you to do. And like a piece of dialogue might show up at the bottom, and a character might say a very short line. And if all you listen to is the voice acting, you might hear it and then go on to the next thing. But then you might read what the context is, and it'll be like a whole lot more context towards what is going on. And sometimes you might. I tried to be really diligent and listen through all the voice acting and all the cutscenes, but there is just a lot. And it just contributes to that long runtime. But if you enjoy reading.
Yeah, that's always a big like frustration of mine, of like, I can read really fast and like and still get like understand what I read. So like when I'm like wrestling with like, I can just skip this line. I know it's voiced, but they're reading really slow, and I already finished this line, and they're barely just starting to like voice it. It's one of those like frustrations. Like, I'm sorry, I'm sure this voice acting is great, but I got to move on. I've already read this line. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and I guess there is a little bit of here, I found an example. I was paging through some of my screenshots. So you're helping this person in the demon city that wears a red mask. You don't know their name, so you just call them by Red Mask. Red Mask wants you to help take care of basically a person that they've painted as a villain and a thief, and like, I'll pay you if you help me. Then it says you end up fighting this enemy who is named Latverk, who is basically someone who pretended, I hope I get this right, pretended to be an Aasimar, which is like an angelic creature, but was really just, it was all just a ruse.
Not to be confused with ASMR.
Yes, I think it's ASMR. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But it's you go into this place, you fight this villain, and then Red Mask is alongside you, the person that asked you to do this. And it's like, without further ado, the Avenger bends over Latberg. When she stands up again, she's holding the bloody strip of skin that used to be the ASMR's face. The woman takes off her mask and smiles with satisfaction. He took away my beauty. Now I've taken his. Red Mask then stretches Latberg's face over her own. Basically, you start to realize that the reason she was wearing her mask is because this person stole her face. And if you weren't reading this, you would not have like that gruesome imagery, and you're like, oh shit. So it ended up being like, that's the sort of stuff that I really think that this game does well, where you're like, I'm not exactly sure what the context is. And if you didn't read that, you would totally miss that, just that whole, like, how gruesome this was, and how, like, does either person from this end up coming across looking like a good person? No. So it's stuff like that I think this game really does well. And it comes in spades. All right.
Do you know if there's multiple endings to this game, or there's actually just the one ending?
It's a linear story, but it's there's a lot of games, especially Western RPGs, where once you reach the end of the game, it kind of like pages through all the companions that you knew and like where they end up, or all the places that you visit and where they end up, and those can diverge based on how you completed specific quests. But the ending is always the same, but the framework of how the ending completes can shift.
Okay.
You end up choosing a mythic path, which is basically like I don't know how to word this. I chose a mythic path of an Azada, which basically is a mythical creature from the realm of Elysium or whatever. But you can also do like Lich or Dragon or Angel or Demon, things like that. And what mythic path you pick ends up shifting what you're allowed to do at the ending. So I only ever saw the one because I've only played through the game once, and I might play through again in like 5-6 years to see another path, but I'm not eager to do that right now. But which mythic path you pick kind of opens up what options you have. And then there is also, like, how do I word this? There's like a secret endings where you can like extend the ending if you make the proper choices throughout the game, or if you end up learning enough about the villain, you can sort of like talk them down before fighting them or after fighting them, things like that. So you can kind of shift like how the ending unveils, but you can't. It always ends like at the same point in place, so it diverges, but just slightly. At least I've only played through the game once, so it's not like I've really been able to research this, but it diverges.
Are you going to replay the game again?
Eventually, I probably will. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough that I probably will.
I want to get around to this game. I know it's a long time commitment, but it seems like it feels like it would scratch that itch of mine that I've been wanting to like find like a really good CRPG for some time. And, like, not a lot of like big ones have come out like this.
Well, it's weird, yeah, because when Pathfinder Kingmaker first came out, it was the same year as like Deadfire and the same year as Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition. It was like, and then I think Wasteland 3 was in development, or 2 Definitive Edition had just come out. Where now it kind of feels like there's just less like that big bubble of releases and that type kind of has come and gone. So
it's I think nothing really like scratches that itch, because like I like real time and pause like you, but like it. Let's say Disco Elysium, for example. Like, that's not really a game that like you like partake combat in. It definitely scratches like that Planescape Torment itch if you like really like dialogue and like engaging with dialogue like that. But there's like not like any sort of combat that you have to worry about, or like micromanaging, like, you know, how you build up characters in a real time and pause game.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, from this probably comes no surprise, but everything you've just described seems like the least appealing game for me. Like,
I'm sorry you're listening to this podcast, and no. That was your takeaway.
Fantastic.
No, because I like the fact that you're so into it, and I like hearing about it. But if I was imagining me sat there, I just can't get past 100 hours. Like, that just makes me feel.
After 40 minutes of discussion, George Ring's just like, man, everything we just spoke about like almost in the last hour, holy shit, it was awful for me.
Oh man,
I like some elements of it.
If you have nothing nice to say, George, don't say anything at all, like me.
Yeah. Wow,
I just think
shit.
This has come from the person who, again, I said this before we started, who likes stuff like Marvel's Avengers. So maybe my opinion shouldn't be trusted or listened to, but it's just not my sort of thing. I don't think. But we said the same about Disco Elysium, and that ended up being one of my favorite games ever. So we never know.
Well, part of the reason like I wanted to cover this is I do just sort of enjoy this style of game, but B, I almost feel like this is like an RPG in its truest sense. Now that's kind of a loaded statement because people have as we've discussed 100 times, there is no consensus on what an RPG is. There just isn't. But this is like it's pen and paper roots. It's coming from 10 tabletop games that was birthed out of Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of like the godfather of so many series and so many worlds.
It's a timely discussion too, because as of this moment, at the time of this recording, Steam has this tabletop RPG sale as well. So if you want to know more about like those kinds of games, they have a whole section and sale for like a ton of those games.
And sometimes it was just kind of nice just to play like a longer, slower paced game. Though I will admittedly, like by the time I was in like Act 5, I was like, please end, please be over. Like, if they had taken out the Crusade stuff and this game was a mere 70-hour game instead, like I actually kind of feel like it would have been better. But it's still like I still recommend it. It's still a game I recommend. Just the Crusade stuff, you just kind of have to close your eyes and grit your teeth. Just that's how it is. In my opinion.
That seems really cool. Yeah, everything we've spoken about, at least, unlike other participants in this podcast, I was into.
Well, if I have to listen to you guys talk about, I don't know, I don't want to pick on
Smash.
Super Robot Wars. You get to listen to me talk about this.
Josh was on your side.
Damn, dude.
Like all the fighting, all the Guilty Gear talk that I feel so lost in or whatever. So,
all right, just everything I'm into. Like I was into what you were saying, that you're just targeting everything I like.
God damn it! Fine. James's visual novels there. Or Chow's Genshin Impact. I'll just pick
Civil War here. By the way, welcome to the podcast, Chow.
Oh yeah, I was here this whole time. I just came in really late.
Yeah. So Chow showed up right after we did introductions, but then I guess I was talking about Pathfinder for 40 minutes and never got around to it. So welcome, Chow.
How's it going?
As you can see, it's a fucking gigantic fire Civil War in here.
Alrighty, so Pathfinder is good. It's still a little bit buggy, but it's an ambitious game that I think is worth playing if you have the stomach for it. Sorry, George. So a lot of games are coming out in this upcoming week that I know Josh in particular is looking forward to. One of them that I just dunked on. But up until the release of Super Robot Wars, what have you been playing in the meantime?
I've been kind of just jumping from game to game, like thinking like, how do I burn time till then? So I'll talk about with this Demon Slayer game in a little bit with George, because I know he's into it. I've also been dabbling with Xbox Game Pass, and they have a little game called The Rift Breaker that I've been really into. It's kind of like a hybrid tower defense, base building, and a little bit of action RPG elements. I've spent 10, 15 hours into that, maybe. It's been really fun and scratching an itch of mine that I've had. But for the purpose of this podcast, RPG wise, I think a few weeks ago, some fine folks, I don't remember the name of the group, I'm so sorry, but they released a fan translation for a Suikoden game that came out in 2012. They localized the subtitle for it as The Woven Web of a Century. The original name is Sumugareshi Hyakunen no Toki. It was released back on the PSP, and I'm still very early into it. I've put 4 or 5 hours into it so far. It's okay, it's not it's a lot more like modern Suikoden than old Suikoden, in the sense that I don't believe there's any sort of art, not RTS, but there's a strategy element to older Suikoden games that this doesn't have. It's a lot like Tetracast or whatever the fuck how you pronounce that game, where it does have the 6-person party system, and that was in Suikoden 5 as well, and you arrange them on a 3x3 grid. The magic system in this game is based on a character's class rather than having the rune system or the Mark of the Stars that the older Suikoden games had. to
By the
grant
way,
you those things.
the group is called Twisted Phoenix Game Translation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a big
Mm.
shout out to those folks. Thank you very much. This is really cool. The setup for this game is really weird, and like it kind of it feeds into like how like the kind of neat gimmick about this game, where at the beginning you name this protagonist, but he's not silent. He's a very active participant, main character, has a lot of voice lines and whatnot. And you're part of this village, like the village, I think it's called. And the world setting is that every 100 years there's these centennial monsters that are super like tough monsters that appear, and it's humanity's like obligation is like to quell them because they don't want to be exterminated and whatnot. So you're early on you encounter one of these creatures with your main character, another character named Mira, and her brother Gino. And then they're like, okay, well, we'll hold them off. Gino, you go alert the village that this is happening. And amidst all this as well, there's this like army that like is kind of strong arming like nearby communities and villages to like to be annexed by them. So they kind of have this struggle with them as well. Like we don't want anything to do with them. We want to remain independent and whatnot from them. So as the main character and Mira are back into like these ruins, that like for some reason the monsters can't like enter, like there's this barrier. They come up across this era tree, and this era tree has like this mystical property of like bringing them back 100 years. They kind of stumble into it by accident, and like there's this mysterious white-haired character named like Zeno or Zeno, and so they traveled back 100 years, and they meet like like a distant ancestor of the main character who practices like the same like sword style, like the blue flash sword style. And this person, I think his name's like Thorwell or whatnot, and or Thorb, I don't remember. And he's by that point where in their time period, he's like a legend. He's like, oh man, he's like this great hero from back then that drove off these monsters 100 years ago, these the centennial monsters of their time and whatnot. So he's already very famous and well known to them. And they explain the situation to him, and it's like it's all unbelievable, but it's like, okay, well, you have this like artifact, like a knife on you. It's like exactly the same, like the scratches are here the same, like, but there's only one of these, and the typical early JRPG stuff. And how you learn skills in this game is essentially like a person from the past that has like your same class like kind of teaches on their techniques to you. So for example, when you get this Thorb guy with you for temporarily, he's like level 50 and you're still like level like 3 or whatnot, and he teaches you like, okay, we both practice this blue flash sword style, so you link them up through your main menu and like this unite system, and you want to pair up this dude with the main character because they're the same class. And how this is represented in battle is every time that this Thor guy does the second form wave skill, your main character will do the same skill after him, but it's much weaker, and that's how you gain mastery. Obviously, kind of meant to represent, okay, I see it, I understand it, I'm gonna try to replicate what you did in battle and whatnot.
I was half expecting you to say like when they go 100 years in the past and they meet up with this guy who's like this known hero, that actually he was a drunk or whatever. I know that's a very like well-worn trope or whatever, but I always get a kick out of that when it actually plays with the idea of like how legends or folk tales kind of like grow bigger than their source material.
This one's much more straightforward. This guy seems like a swell guy. Yeah, he's
level 50 or whatever.
Nice. Yeah. So that's kind of how you learn skills. I imagine once I go back to the past again and meet other characters with the same subclasses, like the mage, I'm sure they'll teach Mira, who's a mage in my party. She'll learn more spells from them and whatnot. It's also really interesting with the spell system in this game. It's a typical turn-based game. Nothing too special about that. But like when you cast spells in this game, it actually takes like consumable items for you. So like you need to have like a fire gem with you to cast a fire spell, and every time you cast one of those, it'll consume a gem permanently from that. So you have to be careful about like your item management as well. But then you'll back in like your kind of home fort, you'll have like this production facility that like you can get more of these items from a workshop and whatnot. So, um, I I guess that's kind of like the main thing that I've only seen so far that like makes me go okay. But then there's this whole type of like unite system when you're like pairing up characters as well that I don't exactly know how useful they will be right now, because right now I'm just spamming that second form wave AoE that does a ton of damage to all the monsters that I learned from the legendary hero from back then. Because as you, it kind of, this unite system deals with how the turn-based nature of the game plays out. Usually if everyone's just separate, they'll act on their turn. So like, you know, if I click attack on my main character and then Mira and then a third party member, when when I click attack, they'll attack immediately. But if they were united, they would all like you click attack on all of them, and then they would all wait until like the last person would go, and then they would all attack at the same time. And that doesn't. But I'm not sure exactly what kind of bonuses you get out of that at the moment.
I was going to ask, like, what's the benefit of that?
Yeah, there is like some pairs, like say main character Mira, and I forgot the third party member's name. She's kind of like a herbalist, which is meant to be the healer of your party. And then like if you unite them together in the main menu, like it says Soul of Thebe on them, so it says something special between the three of them, and then it says up speed, up tech, and then like I'm not exactly sure like how that affects it, because they now have a unite attack option for them when they're all paired up. But when I do it, it's like it still feels weak. I don't know if that like if they all do it, it'll raise their speed and tech stats because they did that attack. So there's certainly like, you know, some degree of like maybe customization there. But other than that, it's straightforward at the moment because I'm still early on. Obviously, you go into shops, you buy equipment, armor, whatever. And then the world map is just basically, since it's a PSP game, they're limited technologically what they can do. So you have this world map, but you go into each zone, and each zone is fairly small, has like creatures you can run into to like initiate combat. It's not random battles. You can see the enemies on the field. I imagine, you know, as I get deeper into it, I'll meet more characters that'll like join like my fort, like how usually Suikoden games are. So like you may have NPCs that'll have like new shops or new functions to give to your party later on. But it's kind of like a just a neat thing just to see this in English now, and you know the fan translation quality is pretty good.
Well, I actually
And-
didn't realize, like, for some reason, like I've not played Suikoden. I kind of wish Adam was here for this because he adores this series. I wonder if he's
Yeah.
interested in trying out the fan translation. But for some reason, I had always kind of had in my mind that Suikoden died with Suikoden Tear Christ. But then this game came out like 4 years later, and it's the most recent spinoff, as far as I can tell.
Think so. I can't remember anything.
Does Suikoden have any? This is gonna sound like really judgmental, but does Suikoden have any of those like bastardization mobile spinoffs or no? I don't think it does.
No, it's not like Breath of Fire.
I was thinking of Breath of Fire, yeah, but yeah. So Tear Christ was 2008, and then this game released for PSP 2012, but only in Japan, and that's the most recent spinoff. So going on 10 years.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, and then I guess we're all waiting for that 100 Heroes Chronicle game, the Eiyuden Chronicle game. It's
Mhm.
meant to be a spiritual spin-off, sequel to it. So, you know, it's just one of those. It's like, oh, you know, I totally forgot that the fan translation came out. I just wanted to dip my toes into it and then kind of work my way through it slowly and see, you know, how it holds up. But you know, it's been a very long time since I played a Suikoden game.
So yeah, we'll
Unfortunately.
have it in the timestamp, but it'll be Suikoden Woven Web of the Centuries. It's English fan translation by Twisted Phoenix Game Translation. So if you're interested, you can look it up and see what's out there. Were you going to say something, Chow?
And yeah, I was gonna say there's another fan translation project that just came out recently too for people that are Falcom fans. There is the Yeast versus the Trails in the Sky series that recently just came out as well by
Oh
the
yeah, that's
Real Front group.
the PSP fighting game. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a collab between like the East like 7 cast versus like the Trails in the Sky first chapter, maybe second chapter cast, and it's
No, isn't there
there's
some
like Lloyd
some
isn't
cross-
there.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Lloyd isn't there as like the sole like bonus character because it was at a time where like Zero no Kiseki was still new. So I think he's like a secret character. I forgot, but yeah. So I mean that's just a neat little thing, like just seeing because that uses like the E7 battle system. in
Yeah.
there.
Well, we also saw that Tales of was it Tales of Destiny fan translation project that they released a trailer for a few months back. Destiny 2, the real Destiny 2.
Yeah, not Eternia, you guys. Not
Right,
Eternia.
yeah. I always forget if Destiny Roman numeral 2 is the real one or Destiny Arabic 2 is the real one. But the one that
I
we never
definitely
officially
played-
got.
I definitely played 2, and I could even like summarize it. I remember the game fairly well because I imported when the game first came out, but I'm not sure if anyone wants to hear me rant about it.
No, I think
Maybe.
it's cool to see like the fan translations or if people import because they understand the language, talk about these games that we don't get to get the official releases. And we know that the Geofront group, especially, obviously, that their work on the Trails from Zero into Azure is being used for the official releases for those, in the upcoming years. So I have no doubt that their Yeast versus Trails game is at a similar high bar of quality. And it sounds like the Suikoden game has got a really good translation. This Tales of Destiny director's cut and 2 looks like a really promising project. It's really cool that we live in the world where the tools and the expertise and the passion to do these sorts of things from fan groups is something that we can all benefit from. Hey, George, you still
Hello.
there?
Of course.
What do you want to talk about?
Is it time? Is it time?
I don't know.
I think it should be time.
All right. So we 3 weeks back, when was the last time you were on the podcast?
Last time was 3 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and then
So-
it's 2 weeks ago, I think.
It's also the last time I was on here that I referred to this reference, if I remember.
But we gave you a bunch of shit for wanting, expecting, hoping, dreaming for Sora in Smash as the last character. I know this was announced 2 weeks ago, but you weren't here. But now you are. So how is it? Is it everything you dreamed it would be?
Oh God. So first of all, I guess I should talk about how I reacted to it. Everyone loves a good reaction. I was
Did you
sat
film
there-
Why don't you
yourself?
emulate it like audio only?
Oh,
emulate
I
the
couldn't
reaction.
emulate that. I can never go that high pitched again. That was inhuman. It is. I've watched it so many times since it gets me every time. And I would
trailer?
say it is one of the attributes. Yeah, the trailer, because it's like it's so up until the last second where the Keyblade shows up. You have no clue who it is. I was like, oh, it's a Dark Souls character. Fair enough. Okay, I guess I'll stop celebrating. And then as soon as that Keyblade shows up, I leapt out of my seat. Tears were flooding. I was screaming. The neighbors were probably like hating their life. And he's just, I guess, emotional talking about it. It's just so. There's so much love put there, like in that trailer, in his appearance. It's so like, yeah, Sora's here. Come on, like Sora is finally here, like they say. And that's exactly why I didn't think he would be, because it's such an obvious pick, isn't it? Like, I remember you guys at the time were sort of like, you guys weren't like super surprised by it. But I've been telling myself for years it could never happen because Disney and because Kingdom Hearts doesn't really have much of a presence on Nintendo. I guess Melody of Memory and Dream Drop Distance. Oh,
Well,
actually,
remember
that's quite
alongside the announcement, we talked about this
Data
on the
memories.
podcast.
Well, technically,
we-
you can't see the Disney characters in the ad, right?
Oh, I'll get to that.
we do. We see the Mickey Mouse keychain. That's the only representation.
Yeah, but you don't see like the Donald Duck and Goofy and was it like the portrait, the rose tinted glass or whatever?
the-
This is a little bit of we talked about this obviously on the cast where because obviously just covering this, they announced the Switch stream versions of the games and all the other stuff. And we did talk about how the Smash implementation was with Donald and Goofy being replaced by like generic artwork. But I'm totally on board just going through it again now that we have George's presence to go through it.
I'm honored. At first I was kind of like, it doesn't bother me at all, to be completely honest. Pardon me. I think Kingdom Hearts on its own is iconic enough and does enough without Disney that I don't think it needs to be there, if that makes sense. I know like you can never escape it because it's hanging off of Sora all the time.
So Sora is technically a Disney character. Like I think that's how the rights play out.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the thing. It's like I've said this before when we've talked about like the future of Kingdom Hearts, when I've like started getting excited about it. I truly believe that the next one is going to be as separated from Disney as it possibly can be. I think it's going to be all Zora, it's going to be all Quadratum, it's going to be all Sora and Riku. If Donald, Goofy, Mickey, they'll probably appear. Well, yeah, they'll appear, but like there won't be Disney worlds. Is my thinking.
I wonder if they'll start crossing over with other Square Enix properties instead.
I would love that. Like this is the thing. I don't think.
Well, I guess they've already done that.
I love the Disney stuff.
With Green Pistons.
It's one of the most exciting parts pre-release. Is like, oh, what worlds are going to get in, and it's always been one of my favorite parts of each game. But I don't need that now. Like I'm on board for like Sora's adventure. I'm not sure how many people agree with that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like need the Disney and they want the Disney, and that's why it's so mainstream. But the fact that Donald and Goofy aren't here, I would have liked to reference them, but it doesn't like ruin it at all. I've seen some people say like, disgusting censorship. Disney characters are gonna be expensive, I guess. And there's still so much
crazy to look at the copyright tag on Smash Bros. Now, how it has to have so many Disney. Like just added Disney at the end, but all the strings that had to be like I can't imagine what this looked like behind the scenes.
I'm already used to like long copyright tags. You should see the copyright tags for Super Robot Wars games in general. That would be
another one. Yeah. But now I pale in comparison to George, but I do consider myself a Kingdom Hearts fan. Maybe less so now, but like I adored the games growing up, and I pre-ordered most of them in middle school, early high school. And it's kind of weird. Like I've gotten to this point where I kind of think of Donald and Goofy as like not Disney characters. At least they're incarnations in the Kingdom Hearts series. Like if you told me Kingdom Hearts is going to have no Disney going forward, or very, very little, I would be like, all right, whether I'm okay with that is whether or not you kind of grandfather in whether Donald and Goofy appear. Because to me, like they're like non-negotiable. Like they better be fucking in there. Because I don't know.
I fully agree. I 100% agree. When I say no Disney, it's like it's kind of a cheat because it's like no Disney except for the ones that are important to the story. Like Yensid has to be there, Mickey has to be there, Donald and Goofy. But that's 4 Disney characters.
I don't even go that far. Like Yensid, whatever, Mickey, take her or leave it. Donald and Goofy, they better be there. God damn it! I better play a Sora and have Donald and Goofy on my side by my side. Like if it doesn't have that, it's not a Kingdom Hearts game. And that's probably a bit of a fossil, but a bit dogmatic. But that's my mindset.
No, I see that. I see that viewpoint like completely as well.
It's like Birth by Sleep. There's Aqua, Donald, and Goofy in Birth by Sleep.
It's like Kingdom Hearts, the next Kingdom Hearts, if it turns out to be like a Dream Drop Distancy, Zora, Riku, Sora, whatever thing, I don't think that I can imagine if they announce that, it's like, this is just a Kingdom Hearts adventure, don't worry about Donald and Goofy. I can imagine like riots in the street over that. But Kingdom Hearts 4, when that eventually happens, that's going to have Disney worlds. Of course it's going to have Disney worlds. Like I believe like all of the big ones will going forward, but in Kingdom Hearts 3 we really start to see them shift away from that. I think like the Disney worlds felt really forced. Like it's literally all of them up until the last one like will give you like even the slightest bit of story importance besides like I guess lessons Sora learns, but then they're not needed. They're fun, they're great. Like the Toy Story world's probably one of my favorites ever in Kingdom Hearts, but I just don't think it's like super necessary anymore.
I do think they did better in 3 than they did in 2. Because in 2 they did this terrible thing where they just kind of like you pantomime the story of the movie, only you're Sora now.
Yeah.
Where in 1 and in 3 it was more like we're using that IP to set the premise and the setting, but we're going to try to incorporated into at least in Kingdom Hearts 1, they tried to incorporate it into the overarching story. In 3, maybe not as effectively, but they didn't just say like, you remember how this movie played out, right? We're going to do that again. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things that like I like being able to like see the novelty of exploring Disney spaces. Because you just don't really get that in games anymore, especially like having like a slick combat system on top of that as well. So like I it's just one of those weird like separations of like does this game exist just to have every world serve its plot and that's it? Like if your space isn't plot relevant, should we even have it in there? Should we even have like the novelty of like the fun of like other people of like being able to explore the space in a novel way? Just like because we don't get big budget Disney games like in that kind of manner.
No, I agree. And that's the thing. It feels like such a weird argument to make as a, Kingdom Hearts is my favorite thing in the world. So like to say, oh, I wouldn't mind if it lost some of its identity. It's less that, and it's more, Smash has proven that it's not, Kingdom Hearts isn't screwed without Disney. If Disney go, oh, you know what, we can't bother to give you all these movies, just do Kingdom Hearts thing. Like Kingdom Hearts will be fine.
Well, no, it wouldn't, because literally Sora and all the actual Kingdom Hearts characters are owned by Disney. If they said, "Oh, we don't want to,"
yeah, you know what I mean. Like if Disney was like randomly selective and go, "Yeah, you can't have any worlds. You can have Sora. Do what you want with him. You can't." If they did what they've done with Smash, I would be okay with that. And I feel like that was kind of the same with Kingdom Hearts 3, where it had no Final Fantasy characters, right? It's really noticeable, and it's
not until Remind.
Remind barely did. It was like, yeah, here's a cutscene. Like,
didn't Nomura even outright say that like the Final Fantasy characters and whatnot were like a hook to get people into what he actually wanted, which was mostly the actual like Disney stuff?
Yeah, like that sounds about right. And that was noticeable. I remember complaining about it at the time, but it was like Kingdom Hearts 3 is still amazing, and it's still good for all its own reasons. And this is all beyond the point of like Sora actually being in Smash, but just from seeing that, besides the excitement of oh my god, it was like, oh, so does this indicate anything about Kingdom Hearts' future? Does it indicate anything about where it's going to go?
Okay, all right. Let's rein it in then. Let's regather ourselves.
Yes,
Sora, how good is he in Smash?
He. By my mark,
I assume I'm talking to a pro Smash competitive player.
Yeah, well, what tier? Yeah, is he S tier? Pick a top
he's
tier.
Like SSS S tier. We've taken the mick out of it before. Take the Mickey Mouse out of it. I guess would work better here. But yes, I play on Wi-Fi. No, I don't have a cable yet. When I move house, I'll probably I'll hook it up. But
okay, so you play Super Smash Brothers Ultimate online through Wi-Fi, and then you're like, yeah, me and my opponents are a-okay with it. They're having a blast playing me. I'm having a blast playing them. They can't react to what I'm doing because I'm fucking Sora, and it feels good to win, Well,
I don't win that much, so that shoots that argument. I'm okay at Smash. I know what I'm doing. I've been playing it since like
I held the controller before.
Yeah, I can mash buttons, but I'm pretty. I know I know a tier list. I agree with like picks for tier list. I'm not like a super combo person, but like I can hold my own. And right now, to be completely honest, Sora feels like he's got like a hat on top of a hat with some of his moves. So he has. They really really focus in on the fact that Sora's name is like it's air, and that he's really light, and that he can glide and he can fly, and like that's his thing. Which I would. If you asked me to design Sora as a character, I don't know if I would go straight away to the fact that he can fly and that he's floaty, but that Kingdom Hearts fans hate that word. They hate the word floaty. You can't say that. But he has the ability to. He has his Sonic Blade as like his side special, and that thing, oh my god! Like you could do it 3 times in a row. It's an attack that's actually pretty powerful and has like some pretty good knockback. You can combo your up air. Oh no, you can combo your side B into an up air to recover. Like he's just like nuts in the air. But he's really fun. He's so fun to play. It feels weird to say like, oh, they've nailed how a Kingdom Hearts character would feel in Smash, but maybe it's just because I'm so excited about it, but like I think they have. And it just makes me want like a Smash fight, like a Kingdom Hearts fighting game so much. Just like,
well, I do think that this is an appropriate final character. It just feels like it's big enough. It's kind of like a crossover of crossovers sort of thing. I'm trying to think, like, if it wasn't Sora, who would be worthy? And I don't know if I have an answer to that.
There's only one right answer, and that's Sakurai himself. If it wasn't Sora, it better be Sakurai himself then.
I remember watching the trailer, and it was like when it started doing like all of them turning back into figures, I was like, oh, it's gonna be Master Hand. It's gonna be like a shrunk down version. And I was like, this, for the legacy of Smash, that'd be cool, but that wouldn't be the right angle. Same with Waluigi, where it's like, Waluigi would be a great pick in the next Smash if they do.
They try to piss off a lot of people listening to this podcast.
I am so sorry, Waluigi fans.
If they did Waluigi, it should have been like an unexpected coda, like Waluigi's also here, or something like that.
like a piranha plant sort of thing, where it's like, yeah, Waluigi's free, like as a celebratory thing. I mean, Sakurai
just sounds like a long last, like he's ready to, like, Master Chief fans, fuck them, not appropriate. Dante fans, you already got your amiibo, fuck you, or not amiibo, or me costume or whatever, fuck you. And it's like,
I mean,
Gino fans.
my pick would be Rayman. Like, if I had to pick one, I know that's like blasphemous.
I'm actually kind of surprised.
Am I a Kingdom Hearts fan? Because I keep flagging it off. But
no, I'm actually kind of surprised that this is going to sound totally more judgmental than I mean, but someone as young as you like has a soft spot for Rayman. I just feel like Rayman was before your time. Is this based on the Origins Legends game?
Rayman was just like in my time, like the third one, Hoodlum Havoc. That was I was obsessed with that game. I played that game so much. And then I moved back onto 2. I think it was Revolution, the sort of remakey one. And then back onto 1. And then by that point, it's like, wow, Rabbids. I wonder if they'll like ruin Rayman. Oh, they did. And Origins the Legends saved him. But yeah, I love Rayman. He would have been my pick.
I heard some very
again, it's weird. But go on.
I heard like was it back when like 4chan was doing like leaks? There was one of them. They were doing the Prince from Dragalia Lost because of a side games collab.
Dude, I would have fucking died. I'd be like, this is the most troll fucking pick ever. That was the case. They really do hate everyone that if they picked him.
That's the most hilarious pick. It will piss off so many people.
It would even piss Dragalia Last players off, dude. Like, what the fuck is this shit? So, I mean, no one actually wins with that, so that's why they just hate everyone if they picked him.
I think it's the reason why I got so emotional, and I mean, like I was a wreck. I could barely type. I was just there, like, oh my god. And even now, when playing him, I sometimes have these moments of like, oh my god, this is real. Like he's in Smash. Is less that he's actually made it in, which is still kind of amazing, but the fact he's like the final character, the fact that he is the most requested pick. Sometimes it feels like being a Kingdom Hearts fan. I know it's a massive
Mm-hmm.
property, but sometimes it feels like you can never really win. Like if you're like, I'm a Kingdom Hearts fan, people are like, wow, you're dumb. So to see sort of like yeah, Retribution, everyone wanted him. Yes, not Retribution, that's a bit more violent, but yeah, validation. And it just reminded me something I haven't felt even when Melody of Memory was about. Like I'm so excited for Kingdom Hearts again. And I was excited for Melody of Memory, you guys will remember, but like, that was a rhythm game, and it seemed like Kingdom Hearts was a million years away, like the next one, and now it's like, no, they've got some momentum again. Yeah. So yeah, I love it so much. I can't even express it. Like it's hard.
I did buy the PC versions like a sheep, like all $100 to get all of them. And like I do want to replay. Like as soon as we get more news on Kingdom Hearts, whatever in the world is next, who the hell knows? I'll probably like start
buy the one on the Switch.
You actually gonna play through all the Kingdom Hearts games? Is that what you're gonna say?
I'll do it again.
He's like, don't tempt me. No, I'll do it.
Well, Kingdom Hearts 3 is a really good port on PC, at least.
Yeah. I will be playing the heck out of that on. No, it's Steam. I was gonna say on the Steam Deck, but it's pretty epic games, isn't it?
You'll still probably be able to play it. I mean, like Tim Sweeney's outright said that they're not going to do anything to prevent Epic Game Store from working on Steam Deck. So
James, I have like the technological capabilities of a spoon. Like if it's not pre-installed onto this Steam Deck, if it isn't like glowing light saying
We'll have to,
do
we'll have
this
to
to
fly
play
James
Steam,
out
I
to
can't do it.
England to go set up your Steam Deck. Alrighty. That's all right. This is a fun chat. I'm glad I got to talk about Pathfinder. We got to talk about a surprise Suikoden fan translation, and it's always good to dive back into Kingdom Hearts for the thinnest of reasons, such as a Smash Bros. Cameo. But it's fun. In the last week, we didn't have any major features go up on the site. It's just been a slower week in terms of like it didn't time out for reviews or any impressions pieces. But all the pieces that we have been putting up lately are still up there if you haven't gotten to them, like the Lost Judgment review, Tales of Arise, the impressions of Hajimari no Kiseki from James, and a few other things that we had put up that we talked about on the podcast last week. On the news front, we, like I said at the header, the theme for today is I hope you're looking forward to February, because that is where everything is landing, apparently. Not a lot in terms of major announcements. We did, I'll just open with this one because we got to open with something. We did get a very short trailer about the upcoming Starfield, which is obviously Bethesda's next major Western RPG product coming out next November. This is a trailer that basically is setting up the environment and the setting of Starfield called the Settled Systems. However, it does not feature gameplay. It features mostly just concept art, and it's probably like my least favorite sort of marketing for games or media in general, where it goes through like a bunch of proper nouns talking about how in Starfield there's the United Colonies and the Free Star Collective, and the Constellation is a group of organized explorers, and like it talks about pirates and other factions. And I'm excited to hear more about Starfield, but this was just kind of like the most whimperiest, is that an adverb?
Yeah, it's a word now. Don't worry.
All right, it's just like I'm excited to hear more about Starfield, but I just kind of felt like they had nothing to show, but they felt like they had to market something to keep it in our mind. Hey, we're talking about it on the podcast, so maybe they completed their goal. But
I mean,
like,
it's just a whole bunch of nothing, essentially. So I mean, I imagine they're gonna keep on doing this every bi-weekly or whatever, or every month. It's like just slow drip feed till their supposed 2022 release, but we don't know. Nothing set in stone.
I'm just surprised that like they do that big announcement trailer and then it's like, here's more Starfield, but it's kind of nothing and it's concept art. Like
the thing is,
doesn't really act like that.
Is I don't like, I understand that maybe it's not ready to show. I'm not trying to like slam my fist down and be gameplay or bust or whatever, or you better outsource a CG trailer for me because I'm a child. It's just like I felt like they could have organized this differently, because if you watch the Settled Systems trailer, they basically just rattle off a whole bunch of proper nouns, like a bunch of jargon that we have no attachment to. It's just a bunch of words, like just the United Colonies and the Free Star Collective. Like those mean absolutely nothing to me. I feel like a better approach would have been to like do maybe a specific similar style of trailer, even if it's just concept art for each group or something like that. Like this feels very too general, too broad. There's nothing to latch on to for me. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'll wait till I actually know what the hell you're talking about. I do have high hopes for this game. It's just there's not much meat on this bone to talk about. Here's something that we probably wouldn't put at the front part of a podcast in our news section, but I put it here just because of the way it was presented and the content that's here. And I'm talking about Shin Megami Tensei 5. Obviously, we've had recent trailers that have shown off the English voice acting, the setting. This is coming out in early November, in less than a month. But we got basically in the final episode of their basically Shin Megami Tensei 5 news program, they talked about all of the available day one DLC for this upcoming game, and it's a lot. It ends up being how much if you end up getting all of it? $30, and it's a lot. And it's everything ranging from like a demi fiend cameo boss battle to like basically cheat DLC that gives you extra money or experience. I just thought that this was kind of it's emblematic of the world we live in now, where it's like here we are still a few weeks away from release, but we've got these like 7 possible DLC packs that you can opt into ahead of the game's release if you want.
Yeah, it's
So
essentially, they've done this with prior releases too. Like they've done cheat DLC with for Apocalypse, the Nocturne HD. Definitely gotten like those super difficult bosses DLC like with for Apocalypse. There's this big moment in the whole Megami Tensei franchise where Stefan, where if you follow Shin Megami Tensei, you know who Stefan is. He fucking gets up from his wheelchair. It's like, oh my god, this is fucking insane. So, but and then there were like heroes or protagonists from the past SMT games that showed up in that DLC and whatnot. So it's kind of par for the course. It sucks that it has to be like this, like like DLC exclusive demons like Cleopatra and Mephisto are coming, and then you have Artemis with a new design. She'll be back as well, and then you have to pay for them essentially to challenge them, and then able to recruit them. And then with the return of the demon DLC, not only do you get this boss battle with the Demi Fiend from SMT3 Nocturne, you also have the fiends, all, like Matador, Hellbiker, Harlot, Trumpeter, and all of them. You can recruit them after you beat them and whatnot. Which, like, it's one of those things like these types of things would have been like in the base game, like way back when, like in Digital Devil Saga 1, like Demi Fiend was like a secret boss battle that you can have on your second playthrough in there. And if you think about it, like if DDS1 was like released now, it would be like DLC.
Yep.
That's just the world we live in. Instead of secrets,
like I don't want to be overly cynical, but you say that and I'm like nodding my head. Like, of course that would be DLC now. Like cameos are just like ripe for the picking. Like we can pull this out of the game and sell it back to you for $4 or whatever. And my favorite of these DLCs is, this is a cheap one. It's the Mitama DLC. I guess there's actually 3 of them, where it increases the spawn rate of the Kushi Mitama, Saki Mitama, Nigi Mitama. Basically, they are the metal slimes of this game, as far as I understand. They give you extra EXP, Maka, and Glory. And basically, they spawn at a low chance without the DLC. If you buy this DLC, it increases their spawn rate. That's what the DLC does, which you can then revert from the options menu if you wish. It's just like literally spending money so that you run into more metal slimes, or whatever you want to call it. And to me, that is just so scummy. Like, Jesus Christ! Like, I'd rather they just do like the Tails route, where they just say, give us $10 and we'll give you a bunch of items in your inventory that you eat for EXP or whatever. The fact that they're just using it to add a spawn rate toggle to the options menu is just really scummy. Like, I'm not gonna like it's. I mean, you could say it's harmless. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Sure, like that would be what I would do. It's just like, man, like that is as like low as you can go, I feel. But it's it's an option.
It is what it is. They also confirmed that that there will be free DLC, the safety difficulty, which is the super easy difficulty, and Japanese voices. Like, I think that's how they handled it for like the base Persona 5. Royal was already on the disc. But at least those are free DLC. You don't have to pay for them, thank God. But that's, they kind of laid it out. It's like, all right, well, I wonder if we'll see more DLC for this down the line. I can probably see it, but it's already a lot. If you can buy that, you can buy them piecemeal. You can also get the digital deluxe edition. In the US, that's $85. So on top of your $60 purchase, that's additional $25 for everything that they've shown up to this point. And yeah,
it always surprises me, like with Atlas, because they did the same sort of thing with Persona. Like, obviously, I'm not like as big of an Atlas buff as most people, but like I remember seeing when Persona 5 came out, and even when Royal came out, it's like, here's 1 million DLC costumes. And those aren't. I don't really have a problem with that, but some of the stuff you guys have just said now is like, really, like a toggle to basically like get easy XP.
They added DLC to a fucking 2002 2003 PS2 game in the Nocturne HD. They have the cheat DLC in there, and how that manifests is like you like warp to like a separate area, which is like the reused hospital area at the very beginning of the game, and you just basically warp there, and all the random encounters there give you like more money, more experience, or give you items for like to level up and whatnot. And it's just like, okay, I guess.
Well, I'm trying to play devil's advocate, and someone say, well, like, if someone wants to have that, what's the harm? And I don't really have a good like counter argument. Like, I guess there really is no harm, but for some reason, it still just doesn't sit right with me. I guess it just.
I mean,
it's
the cheap
maybe.
DLC, the cheap DLC is whatever, but like for the actual like DLC demon exclusive stuff, it's like, oh, go pay an extra thing to like add this demon to your roster. It's like, why couldn't this be in the base game? It's like, fuck you, bitch. Pay up. Like, all right, I guess. I mean,
I still feel bad about it. Damn it!
People who have played Atlas games should be. I'm not saying it's
boiled
right.
frogs.
I'm just saying it's expected because that's just modern Atlas practices these days. I wish it was better, but the only way it'd be better is like if people stop buying this, and people won't stop buying this. So it's a catch 2022 situation, you know.
I see what you did there. So now we're going to go into basically talking about next year, because that's what all the other news of this week goes into. So over the last couple of podcasts, we've talked a fair bit about the upcoming Atelier Sophie 2, The Alchemist of the Mysterious Dream. It originally leaked through like a classifications board and then a Best Buy listing, and then was finally formally announced at a Tokyo Game Show. We're basically kicking off the marketing cycle where they're going to go into detailing the premise, the characters, as we lead up to its release date next February. So obviously this is a sequel to the original Atelier Sophie, and in the first kind of media dump for it from Gust, they're detailing 2 characters, Olias Enders and Alette Clariette. So if you're looking forward, if you're a big Atelier fan, basically we're kicking off the info dumps for setting up the premise of Atelier Sophie 2. So we have that detail up on the site.
Yeah, if you're an Aoyuki fan, congratulations, you have your Aoyuki and Sophie 2 character.
Oh, is that a voice actor? Or?
Yeah, voice actor is very popular.
Let's see. We have a couple delays that either for sure or might have games arriving in the same window. One of the first ones was one that was originally supposed to release this December, and that is the remake of Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. This was the one that was announced in the Nintendo Direct several months back. They basically just announced it had its fixed release date, but now in order to just arrive with some more fine tuning and feel comfortable releasing the game, it's been pushed back to a generic spring 2022. So
that's fine. I mean, look, we've already waited long enough for any re-release or a new Advance Wars. Make it as good as it can be. So hopefully it launches well.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there a better spring window than others? Early January rather than mid-February, where everything else seems to be landing.
Early March, I guess.
Honestly, with how packed it's looking like next year is going to be as well, it's like, man, there's not really a good spot to put it.
I mean, like March or April, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually do think that's kind of maybe the best result, is that some of these that I'm about to go through end up more like in the April-May timeframe rather than in the February-March timeframe. Speaking of February timeframe, we have a very minor delay in some respects, and that is for obviously Elden Ring. So Elden Ring,
minor, man. That's a whole month. That's not minor.
Well, it's weird. It's weird to me because like it's a month delay. I guess for some reason to me February still feels like so far out, but it's 4.5 months out. It's not that far
not at all.
So like Elden Ring, we learned back in June, was going to release on January 21st of next year. It's been pushed back to February 25th. Basically, just the normal things that they would cite for this sort of delay. It needs extra development time for some final adjustments due to the game's depth. So if you had January circled on your calendar for Elden Ring, now squeeze it into February with everything else.
There's nothing to play in January for me anymore, so I just have to do a second playthrough of SRW. Since
I can't even think of anything that is launching in January now.
No, I'm curious about it. Let me put in honor of the absent Adam. I'm gonna pull up
I
the.
guess it's all important to mention that they also announced that there will be a network test for Elden Ring. It begins on November 12th, so it's very soon. So even though I'm sure people who get into it they'll have a thing that says don't talk about it. People are surely going to talk about it because who's to stop them now?
Pokemon Arceus comes out January as
Right.
well.
Yeah, I was looking at
Just off the top of
Adam's list, and we've got Pokemon Arceus and then Monster Hunter Rise and PC. So at least those are the ones that are dated. There might be other ones that are expected to land there, but yeah, January might be. We always talk about how early next year is going to be packed. But,
Well, Josh, you ready to just bum rush Rise on PC before Elden Ring?
I mean, it's a lot. The window now is a lot wider now. I thought it was going to be a fucking death march because it'd be releasing January, but since it's so far out now, like it won't be too awful. There's also God of War coming to PC, but it's not an RPG, but that's January 14th, and that's
it's adjacent. You level up, you have some loot, you know.
So that's something to look forward to as well, even though I've already played that game. But sure, why not? I'll live with having to wait for Elden Ring just a little bit more, I guess.
Do another Pathfinder playthrough in January.
I'm excited. I'm very excited for Elden Ring. It's one of my most anticipated games next year. Man, I need it.
Speaking of anticipated games, Cyberpunk 2077. I could have kept a straight face on that.
Wow.
All right. Remember several months back, we had that really, really good, super, super thorough release roadmap for their updates.
They keep delaying the game. It's still not out.
The line.
Yes, the line. So originally we had a nebulous late 2021 after continuous updates and improvements for the next generation update for Cyberpunk 2077, along with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Both of those have been delayed to 2022, where Cyberpunk 2077 is right now, the way they have listed is that it will get its next gen version in Q1, while The Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt will get a next gen version in Q2.
I have a serious question about this. Currently, as of the time of this recording, Steam has Cyberpunk for $40 and add this new spanking PC with a 3080 in it. Should I buy this game yet?
Yes. I think so.
Wow.
I loved it. Love is a word I'd use.
This is coming from a person who played the PS4 version of Cyberpunk. To put this into context,
PS5 version,
but it's not the next. It's the back.
Okay, well, yeah, it's not like a native one.
Yeah, that's what this news story we're talking about. That doesn't come out till next year.
You're still waiting. You're still waiting for your Cyberpunk release for all intents and purposes, George.
Yeah, I'm still excited for Cyberpunk. I haven't played the real one. I've played like the beta test. But no, from what I played, I will stand by Cyberpunk being a decent game. I've heard, like, I've talked to people about it recently, and everyone's saying how they've done like a bunch of side missions that are really good that I never went back and did, and made me go, yeah, when this gets its current gen or next gen update, I'll play it.
When you get to play the real version of the game, then
who knows? I trusted the line, Josh.
If it were me, I would still wait. I would wait until you have like your Game of the Year edition, because even if no one agrees that should be titled that,
not like, Game of the Year edition.
whenever they come up with their final, here's everything packaged into one edition.
Call it that.
All right. I think I'm going to trust Brian over George here.
Ouch.
It makes a good point. I'm sorry.
I don't want to go too much on a tangent on Cyberpunk, but
Brian played the PC version, but it looked really good. So
yeah, I played the PC 1.0 version, so even that's been really supposedly tuned up. I uninstalled. What was it? Oh, they recently. So this is a bit of a random tangent. So I wrote the guides for Cyberpunk, and I probably need to like revisit them because they've added, like, I wrote a guide for like all the vehicles, but they've added one, and I was going to go like reboot up my game, update it to figure out like what are the vehicles I'm missing in Cyberpunk, so I can make sure my guide's up to date. But like there was enough updates needed that I didn't have enough space on my hard drive, and at that point I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to uninstall and just not worry about it. So
eject.
Yeah, basically. So it's I will wait until I don't know. I don't have a set date. I'm just gonna wait. I have no inclination to read to
Neither does CD
right
Projekt Red. They don't have a set date either.
Yeah. See,
Do you think we're due for a new Cyberpunk timeline, a roadmap soon?
I can't wait to see the 2022 roadmap.
Oh,
Even
no
more
one ever.
updates and improvements.
Oh boy.
Here's another one that will likely land in February, maybe later for us. I don't know if anyone's really interested in this, but I shouldn't lead off like that. How rude of me.
Oh, negative.
I'm so excited to hear what this is now.
Crystar will release for Nintendo Switch in spring 2022. It's releasing.
Are you excited, George?
I don't know, that game looks nice. I just remembered one of our staff writers who wrote a review of it, and he didn't really like it much.
Thanks for responding, George.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It wasn't George.
It makes me instantly think
It was
of
Lucas.
Crystar. You know the old, I think it's a Sega one. The
Yeah,
stuff of like
all right,
love.
You're thinking of Rice Star. Nice.
I mean, it sounds similar. I can understand.
I mean, I love it.
All right, so okay, so here's some context. Lucas reviewed the game back in 2019. Did not think very highly of it. That review's up on the site if you're interested. The Switch port, I don't think anyone expected, but it's kind of at this point like, why not? Enough of these kind of smaller focus games seem to kind of overperform on Switch. Overperform is a weird way to put it. They do well on Switch. It seems like it's kind of like a good just marketing avenue. And so why not? NIS America must have decided to release on Switch because I feel like it's a good opportunity for them. It'll come out next year. Maybe we'll see if someone's interested and take a look at it, and maybe they'll come away with a better impression than we did on the original release. So we'll see.
George, are you excited?
Yeah.
Name me one thing about this game at all. Name me one thing about this game at all. Without looking anything up.
NIS America.
Oh god.
Yeah.
It has nice art there.
Anime-ish art.
Yeah, well, it's specific. I can't speak like in artsy terms, but it has a specific style of anime art that looks nice. So I can't get anime, sure.
George's third eye's opening. It's like, yes, nice anime art.
Christ.
Okay. Here's another one for February. This is a bit of a different sort of game. This is King Arthur Knight's Tale. This is a tactical RPG that was in early access for the greater part of last year. I remember when this game entered early access, at least I don't know about the staff email, but my email got several requests to try to cover it. But early access is kind of just like, it's a hard sell to cover because everything's so in flux, unless that's like the specific focus of your outlet. But it's it's exiting early access, releasing in full on February 15th, 2022. I do like tactical games. I do like these sorts of more strategic, turn-based, grid-based sort of experiences. It's just that the setting here does nothing for me. It's like a super grim, dark. When I think of King Arthur, I kind of think of like, Knights of the Round Table, that just very generic, Sword in the Stone fantasy stuff. But this is like
Grand Order.
Damn it! I was about to ask Chow. Okay, like in comparison to your viewpoint, Chow, what do you think about King Arthur when you hear King Arthur? And he was already ready to go. Like, god damn it, Chow! Always 2 steps ahead.
But this just looks like really like grim, dark, grungy. Like it's not. I don't associate King Arthur with the sort of art style they have here, and so.
You think about like the Disney King Arthur, the one with the sword and the stone.
Yeah, that's one. I do think of that.
I played that.
I do think of like some of those like late 80s TV shows or whatever. Like I think of it as kind of like somewhat whimsical, like high fantasy, sure, but with like a degree of like whimsy or like a little levity to it.
Or like maybe the third or fourth things I think of when I think of King Arthur, because my brain has been poisoned.
all you Fate Grand Order fans or whatever.
Mm.
I don't know.
I don't know.
what I'm
I always
talking
think of like watching the King offer stuff. It's always
don't
like a
wanna talk
bloodbath.
about it.
That's for me. Like I watched that '80s movie. Does anyone remember the '80s Excalibur movie? That was like a bloodbath, if I remember.
I think of Monty Python.
And with
Yeah,
the Black
see,
Knight.
I do think of that too. So it's kind of like where this is more like we treat this seriously, but it looks competent, but it just doesn't like the setting and the stylings of it don't really grab me. But
Maybe it's gonna be Game of the Year for all we know. You know.
but yeah, next February, it'll have to compete with Elden Ring. So I'm sorry,
Sure.
King Arthur and Neocore Games.
Has to compete with what else? Relayers February.
Cyberpunk's next gen update.
Dying Light.
Oh, is Dying Light also February?
Yeah, that was supposed to be next month, wasn't it? Oh, delays.
Damn, yeah, February 4th. All right. All right, we're out of the February release deluge. A couple sales updates. Monster Hunter World has sold 20 million units. At this point, it's kind of like, what is there left to say? You can probably pull up old podcasts where like, wow, 12 million, wow, 15 million, wow, 17 million, up 20 million. So obviously a big milestone, insane.
We won't say wow this time. We'll say whoa. 20
Yes.
million.
No, we almost seem bored by it at this point. It's like, okay, stop buying it now.
Yeah, so whenever Adam covers these sorts of sales updates, he's usually trying to be like really careful. Like, is this shipped, sold through? Does it include like collector's editions or whatever? Like this one, some of the context here is that we did learn back in May of this year that it was at 17 million, but now it seems like they're also including the Master Edition units, which was the boxed pack that included World and Iceborne. You never quite know exactly like how to incorporate like people who really try to divvy up like how they arrived at the final number. I guess my take is that if you're being that particular about like how did they arrive at 20 million, it's like it's at 20 million, damn it. So
yeah, I mean, and honestly, like you can nitpick all you want about how they got there. Like at the end of the day, this is the most successful game out of Japan that doesn't have Pokemon or Mario attached to it, or Animal Crossing. Yeah, it's like this is like literally outside of Nintendo, which is its whole like a whole different ball game. Like half the time they're not even playing in the same industry as the rest of like video games. This is the most successful game out of Japan, like just straight up. It's ridiculous. And I remember like before it came out that people were like, "Oh man, if it gets to 10 million, that's like the pie in the sky idea." And it's like doubled it.
Yeah. And we did learn back in May of this year that Rise had sold 7 million, obviously limited to one platform. So I do wonder like what the final totals are going to be for that once it also arrives on PC. Because I don't think Rise will meet World. It clearly doesn't seem to have the momentum for it, but it's still like it seems like the success of World has basically elevated the potential for every other game in the franchise going forward.
I think that Rise will at least hit 15 million. I think a lot of people are underestimating just like World was already super popular on PC, but World was also like a pretty heavy game to run on both GPU and CPU. Whereas Rise, like even just playing demo, you can be like, yeah, this will run literally any PC. And that means that the target audience for people playing Rise is like on PC specifically, it's going to be so much more higher because you won't need a top of the line PC to play it at a good like resolution frame rate.
I still wonder what a World 2 looks like. And I'm sure Capcom is thinking like, or already in the planning stages, like what does a sequel to World, not Rise? I mean, like, because Rise is more like somewhat older Monster Hunter games, but like with the world structure, what does a sequel to that look like?
It does wonder like what they have in mind to try to catch lightning in a bottle twice, because like how do you one up that? It's you can't guarantee that everyone that played World is going to want to move on into World 2 or Monster Hunter 6 or whatever they end up calling it. So it'd be interesting to see exactly what approach they take once they're ready to reveal that.
Battle Royale.
On the flip side, though, like when World came out, like the number of people that had played Monster Hunter in the West was so much smaller. I mean, it's not going to be as hard to get people interested in World 2 because obviously so many people loved like World 1. So
Mhm. If they're even as a fraction as successful as bringing new people in, and they have the carryover from the huge World audience, it has a similar potential.
I imagine they would keep the World brand on it too, because that's
Yeah, I
the easiest
imagine
to
so.
acquire.
Yeah. All right, a couple other smaller announcements to close out the podcast here. Here's another next-gen performance patch that released this week. This is for Dontnod's Vampyr, VMPYR, the 2018 action RPG. So it got a next-gen patch for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X that increases resolution and frame rate. So has anyone here played Vampyr?
Nope.
I heard like mediocre. I heard it was like okay.
I remember Kyle's review of it and impressions on it. That's not what I remember of Vampyr.
Yep. So unfortunately, we can't talk to it at length, but it does seem cool that like a little experimental RPG from a few years back, the developer at Dontnod and Focus Home as the publisher went back and said, you know what, we're going to release this was kind of a surprise announcement where they're just like, here's a next gen performance patch for Vampyr for that audience. So I do just appreciate that kind of holistically or whatever. So Josh added a few things to the podcast doc here. So tell me about Haunted Chocolatier.
Oh, Haunted Chocolatier is the new game by the Stardew Valley creator, ConcernedApe. It looks, it doesn't look exactly like Stardew Valley, but it is like that RPG sim style, like overhead view type of game. It like I don't know exactly like the specifics about it, but they talk about like the gameplay loop. It involves gathering ingredients, making chocolate, and running a chocolate shop, which is awesome. That sounds great. But it's still the early stages of development. There's no release date. They kind of released some screenshots, some footage. Stardew Valley, one hell of a fucking game. So, there's a lot to be excited about. And there's a novel concept behind it. I want to run a chocolate shop. That sounds great.
I do kind of like that, where it's like, how do we adapt the farming sim aspect, which is so ubiquitous, and what do we do to tail off from that and like have a similar approach? Why not a chocolate shop? Just
is it like haunted as well?
Well, based on the title, it seems like it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how. Obviously,
I don't know. Right. I don't know, George. You tell me.
All right, I'm looking at like the press release to see like why is it called Haunted Chocolatier?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The very first line of the press release. In this game, you will play as a chocolatier living in a haunted castle. Checks out.
That's the one.
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
That is in an inspired setting. I don't know. You have to be pretty creative to come up with that. So I don't know. It sounds fun.
Yeah, I mean that's it. It'll pop up again when it pops up, but it's cool to see. Just this is such a weird thing. I love it.
I do like how casual ConcernedApe's like diction is in his press release. He's like, so far I've been working alone on this game. I have no plans to get anyone else involved. I can't commit to a release date, sort of stuff. He's just basically like, yes, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I want you people to know about it, but please don't ask any questions.
Yeah, he said like it's only been in development for a little over a year. They've said so. Yeah, it's gonna. They've already confirmed it's gonna be entirely single player. No plans for multiplayer, and they're only committing to a PC release just for now.
And finally, we have a news bit on here that Josh threw on here at the end. Fantasy Life Online, a mobile RPG from Level 5, is getting a Western release thanks to Boltrend Games. Yeah. What other game did Boltrend bring over?
The Disgaea RPG, Arc the Lad R, and
Arc the Lad. That's what I was thinking of.
And the Phantasy Star Saga, whatever game. I think that's what they brought over. This is a really like weird one out of nowhere. The Fantasy Life is kind of like a more RPG sim type of game. You have like 12 classes in it. It's kind of like living off the land type stuff. Um, I'm. It's kind of a weird one because like the whole level 5's Western presence has basically been all but diminished in the throughout the years, especially with like them closing down their U.S. offices and whatnot, and with there's like no plans of level. There's no future for level 5 in the West. It feels like as much as I want like Megaton Musashi to get localized because that looks interesting. That's the giant robot game coming like to the PS4 next month. I think it's also coming to Switch. I forgot, but um yeah, and this is just one that's been developed by them. It's nice to see that they at least found a partner for the
Yeah,
West.
it's weird that for level 5 games, they're like the one name that if we see that attached to a game, we're like, well, guess we're not seeing that one. So even at least in this very
Yeah.
small way, we like, I guess maybe in certain cases it's still possible. In this case, though, it's Boltrend bringing over this mobile sim. But
I wonder how difficult it is for them to like find like external partners to like release their stuff. Like I wonder if there's any sort of like behind the scenes discussion to like bring Megaton Musashi to the West, for example. Like I don't know. That must be really hard.
Did anyone play
that
the 3DS version?
Of
Fantasy Life?
I remember seeing it. I don't think I've ever played it though. How did you play it?
No, I was just wondering if anyone has. Considering we got a lot of big 3DS influence lovers
Yeah.
out there. Or that someone
How many
has played
Fantasy
it.
Life games have been there? Like I'm not too sure of the lineage. I've definitely heard the name before, but I'm not too familiar with the
Though
lineage of the series.
The 3DS game, the mobile port, and then a sequel that was also a mobile game, from what I understand.
Okay. Huh. Did people like those games?
well, it must be they made multiple games.
Yeah, the 3DS game, I remember people liking it, but they also said that, kind of a...
They liked
kind
it, but
of-
they didn't.
Yeah, it was like one of those games like earlier on for the 3DS where it's like, yeah, this is a nice game. It's nice to have something to play on the system.
one piece of news that I accidentally skipped, but I want to make sure we catch here at the end, is that we did get a slight bit of marketing from the upcoming Pokemon Legends Arceus, and a bit of a fun little trailer and reveal. They used like this found footage style of trailer to basically detail some more regional Pokemon in the Hisui region. In this case, Zoroa and Zoroark. So in the mountain snowy region of this new ancient Sinnoh or whatever, just we've already seen that they've done this with a few regional variants in this game, so they're just kind of piling onto the list. So some pretty cool stuff there. But we're kind of in full swing for marketing for Arceus, the one January release, I guess, other than Monster Hunter Rise and PC. So I'm assuming we'll kind of see this doled out over the next month as they. So didn't want to skip over that. It was on accident. But other than that, that covers us for this week. Thank you for listening. As always, all the news that we talked about is up on the site, and we do try to keep all of our game pages up to date. If you look on our sidebar on our website, what all the release dates are. So we've mentioned a whole bunch of delays and release dates for a bunch of these games. Adam also does keep RPG lists for each year. If you just search RPGs of 2021 or 2022, he does excellent job keeping those up to date. So whether it's closing out this year or opening into next, you'll be able to try to time out exactly what your plans will be for the upcoming months. You can always visit our Discord by going to our website and clicking the link at the top of the homepage. We are on all the social media platforms. Just search for RPG Site on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram, and we'll be there. Well, once again, thanks for listening. Stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you next week.
Video games are here almost again.